Hey there guys, Gareth here again, and in this video we're going to start our series of videos discussing the different hero classes, the basics, just the very basics of kind of how you can build a deck around them to synergize with them, using their hero abilities as a bit of a focus as to kind of what the hero class is all about, and a good primer for how to build some a deck or two around the hero classes. We're going to be making actually 4 videos. This is a 4-part series. We're going to be doing three heroes per video, which will make up 9 in 3. Yeah. And then the final video will be looking at the neutrals deck, because it's so big it kind of needs its own video. And then we, discuss the neutrals and how they fit in with other heroes and synergize with different hero decks and so on. So let's start with this video. We're looking at our Hunter, Druid and Mage deck. So let's get into Hearthstone and take a peek. And here we go. Okie dokie. Now let's go to my collection section to start taking a peek at these things. And really we're going to look at the Hunter deck first, because this is kind of the simpler of the 3 decks to look at. It's a good basic hero class to start with. It does have some pretty advanced strategies you can play. But as a beginner, this is probably a good deck to start with, because it's got some very nice ways to synergize relatively simply. It's not a very complicated way to build a good deck with the Hunter deck. So let's consider first what the Hunter's hero ability is. Now the Hunter's hero ability is to do 2 damage to the enemy hero. Kind of simple. But what that indicates to us is that the idea behind the Hunter deck is that it's a bit of a rushdown type of aggressive deck that goes heavily for your opponent's hero to try and win the game relatively quickly. So let's consider that while we're also building our deck here, and just a basic look through the hero deck itself, and you can see there's another very obvious way to synergize, and that's through the use of beasts. There's a hell of a lot of cards in the Hunter deck that work well with beasts, like the Bestial Wrath here, your Unleash the Hounds, Timber Wolf as well, the Starving Buzzard, a very good card to synergize with, your Scavenging Hyena, and there's plenty of them, your Animal Companion, which summons a beast, Kill Command, Houndmaster, and so on. There's a hell of a lot of them. The other thing to look at then is, okay, it synergizes well with beasts, so how do the beasts look in the neutral deck for that kind of deck? And you can see there as well, there's an absolute crap ton of beasts. This is all beasts here that you could add in a beast heavy deck. A lot of variation on beasts you can pick from here. So the idea of a Hunter deck based around beasts is not a bad one. You've got a lot of choice to go for. The idea then behind having a beast deck is to build a deck that can help you power through your enemy quite quickly. So you obviously want the cards that will buff the beasts that you put into the field, like this Bestial Wrath, for example. This isn't a very popular card at the moment, only because it's only for one of the beasts. You give 2 attack to 1 beast. The immunity is nice, so what this really is good for is if you want to pick off an enemy minion, and you don't want your beast to die from doing it. This is actually a good card to do that, but it's very situational. So a lot of decks don't include that, because the 2 cards, that 1 or 2 cards that you would take up in your deck of 30 can be used for other things. So Unleash the Hounds is one of those cards that's pretty much taken ubiquitously if you have a beast deck. And let's see, your Timber Wolf. This is also another debatable one, only because of its low health. It can be picked off really easily, so if you've got some protection for it, it's a very fantastic card. Your Starving Buzzard is almost always taken, and that's because if you're going to be doing a beast heavy deck, you need to get minions out as quickly as possible. So this is a great way to help you make sure you've got the card draw to be able to put out your minions nice and quickly. Without some decent card draw, you're going to get starved for cards, and you won't be able to quite get that critical mass you need to keep him from taking control of the board and to burn him down relatively quickly. Scavenging Hyena is a tricky card, but fantastic if you can keep it alive. Obviously it does get buffed, +2/+1, so that +1 for health only is where the problem comes in, because this might get up to 6 damage, but it's only at 3 health. So it can remain relatively easy to pick off if you're not careful. Other really good cards to include is Kill Command because of the 5 damage it does. If you're running a beast deck, you're almost always going to have a beast on the board anyway. So Kill Command is a good one to take. And Houndmaster, again, is also a great one. Can give you protection and buff a beast with more damage. Great way to help pick off enemy minions and keep your own hero safe. And yeah, Tundra Rhino, the last one of the ones that I would say is kind of compulsory for a beast deck. Having charge is fantastic. If you can get this card out, say on turn 5, and keep it alive until turn 6, you might have a whole collection of, 2 mana cost and 1 mana cost cards. Drop them and immediately do damage. It's a great way to burn down your opponent very, very quickly if you can keep him safe and alive until turn 6. The final one that is a lot of fun to play is King Crush. If you have this legendary, I would say include it, because if you can get to 9 mana, 8 damage straight away, just drop him and bang, 8 damage. It's a really fantastic card to have. And you can imagine if you've got something like the Timberwolf out, or even your Bestial Wrath, or any of those other buffs, you Unleash the Hounds, it's pretty handy to have King Crush out there. So, obviously now you've got your buff cards and you've got your beast minions, but you do need some way to help clear some enemies. Now, the point of the beast deck is that you don't need the single target minion clears. So, for example, taking something like a Hunter's Mark seems fantastic. Not necessarily the best idea, because you will have lots of minions that you've buffed. So you'd rather use them to clear your enemy's minions. What you do want is things like your Explosive Trap, maybe, because it does a nice AoE. You can look at stuff like Explosive Shot, for example. That does some nice AoE again. So your AoE damage is really useful if you start really pushing out a lot of minions and you don't want to kill off all your own beasts trying to maintain board control. Throw an Explosive Shot and, he's taken care of. Multi-Shot is a debatable one, only because it only targets 2 for 3 damage, so it's not necessarily the best. But play around, and if you feel like you do need a bit more kind of AoE clear, Multi-Shot might be an option. Okay, now this is a quick little synergy that I've noticed which works incredibly well. If you can find space for it, try and include the Snake Trap. And the reason I say that, especially if you've got your Starving Buzzard, is because every time, if the Snake Trap is procced by your opponent, those 3 snakes count as beasts, which makes Starving Buzzard draw cards. Pretty useful. I found that actually is kind of funny, and I still struggle to understand how my opponents keep falling for it, because all you really do is on turn 4, you drop your Starving Buzzard, you drop a Snake Trap, or even on turn 2 you can drop your Snake Trap, because you probably won't have minions out by then. Turn 3 you drop your Starving Buzzard, and then ultimately they try to attack your Starving Buzzard. Your Snake Trap drops, and there you go, you've just drawn 3 cards. And to get a 3-card draw out of Starving Buzzard is a very good trade. Even if it dies, it's still a damn good trade to get 3 cards out of him. Yeah, so that's just a very basic little idea that you can play with. There's other ways to synergize with it. I've had decks that play with the Knife Juggler for the same reason. I've actually had games where I've played with 2 Knife Jugglers and a Starving Buzzard out, and then he hits a Snake Trap, and then I put another Snake Trap on and he hits that one too. So it can be very funny. The Knife Jugglers actually kill off the attacking minion, so none of them died. So it can be a lot of fun if you can mix those in. But there we're starting to get into a bit more of advanced strategies that aren't necessarily focused exclusively on beasts. If you're a new player and you're looking for a class that has a relatively decent win rate, without being too complicated, try to focus on a beast deck. It's pretty damn useful. And remember, you can still do a bit of damage every now and then when you've got mana to spare on your hero ability, which helps burn down your enemy a bit quicker. Okay, so that's the basics of the Hunter deck. Let's now take a look at the Mage deck. Now, I'm definitely going to say that the Mage deck is a bit more complicated to play than the Hunter deck, and most people, well, not most people, a lot of new players might not feel that way, because when you start the game, you start with the Mage deck. So you start becoming familiar kind of with what the Mage can do, but really to play the Mage very well, it's a bit more advanced than the Hunter is. The Hunter is kind of much more simpler to build a well-synergized deck with just around beasts, but the Mage deck is a little bit trickier, because if you consider the Mage hero, the Mage's hero ability is to deal 1 damage to any minion. Very, very useful. Well, not any minion, any character. You can even do it to your own. So that is very useful because that just shows that the Mage design principle is around controlling the board through spells. Okay? And the Mage deck, when you look at it, is stuffed to the gills with lots of spells. There's a ton of spells. I mean, they're all over the place. There's Frostbolt and Frost Nova and Arcane Explosion, and there's just a ton of these spells all over the place that you can use. There's all the secrets, there's fireballs and polymorphs and you name it, all over the place. So you can obviously see that the Mage deck is kind of built around lots of spells, which makes sense. I mean, if you've played World of Warcraft at all, that's what the Mage class is. It's a spell class. Now, the tricky thing is that the way to synergize well with a spell deck, at face value, might seem to be build a spell damage deck. But there is a problem with building a spell damage deck, and that is that if you look at the neutrals that you use to help create a spell damage deck, you've got things like the Kobold Geomancer, and unfortunately, it's not a very good card. It's a 2/2 for 2, which isn't too bad, right? But you want something with spell damage that can last until you can play a spell, and it's only got 2 health, so it can get picked off relatively easily. The Dalaran Mage, while it's got a bit more health, is also there's a lot of abilities and minions and spells and so on that can pick off things at 4 health. Ogre Magi is the same thing. It costs an extra mana above the Dalaran Mage, and it's only got 4 health as well. And even your Azure Drake, which has card draw, but it's also only 4 health. So they are tricky to keep alive and so on. The only way to really playing a spell damage deck needs a bit more finesse and control than you'd think. You can't just drop out your spell damage buffs and hope that they stay alive, because they won't. Most players have kind of gotten used to the idea that if there's spell damage stuff coming out, you need to pick it up as quick as you can, because mages can do a lot of pain with extra spell damage. So you do need to find some way to keep them protected, or wait long enough in your game so that you get to maybe turn 4, and then you can play your spell damage and do a Frostbolt for 4 damage, or wait till turn 6 so you can do a 7 damage Fireball. Basically, so you can play your spell damage card and then your spell, so that you get some use out of that spell damage card. Otherwise, it might just get picked off. Wait till turn, and that's the other problem. Wait till turn 9 for a 5 damage Flame Strike. It gets tricky when you start adding up the mana costs of including all those spell damage cards. But there are other ways to synergize well with spells. So immediately you can see there's this little card here called the Mana Worm. It's not too bad. At turn 1 with 3 health, that can survive. But you do then need to consider playing some spells immediately. Well, not immediately, but at least on the second turn you're going to have to use some spells to get good use out of it. So you can see immediately here you've got the Ice Lance for 1 and the Arcane Missiles for 1. Play this on turn 1, play these 2 on turn 2, and now you've got a 3/3. A 3/3 on turn 2 after you've done damage already, that's not too shabby. It's quite nice. Obviously, the other things you can do is to include your Sorcerer's Apprentice, which makes your spells cheaper. That is very, very useful, especially if you are going very heavy on the spell side of things. And trying to see where else. Okay, let's. Where is that card now? You've got the Pyromancer. The Wild Pyromancer is actually fantastic if you've only got him on the field, and if you are playing a very heavy spell deck for the mage, this is very likely a possibility. So you drop him out and you cast a spell that does damage, and then he does damage to all the minions, and then you cast another spell and he does more damage. He'll only last for 2 unless you can heal him, but still, I mean, 2 mana to do 2 damage essentially to all minions, not bad. Not a bad card to consider. You've also got things like your Mana Addict that buffs when you cast spells. So there are ways to synergize around casting spells. And Gadget's an Auctioneer for some card draw, for example. Violet Teacher to get a few more minions out onto the field. So there are cards you can use to help synergize around your spell casting. Now, one of the other strategies you can use for the Mage deck, and if you look here, you can see that it does contain a fair number of secrets. And the secrets for the Mage deck can be quite game-changing. So Counterspell, for example, is quite a nice card if you're playing against a Warlock or a Druid or anything else that also has some pretty big spells. You can counterspell them. Very useful. Ice Barrier to protect your hero. Ice Block as well for more hero protection. And Spellbender again. You summon a new target. So if he takes casts a spell, obviously, then it happens on a 1/3 minion that you get summoned. Vaporize for picking them off. There are some useful cards. There's some synergy with the Ethereal Arcanist, for example. Carentor Mage to make your secret cheaper. So there are some great synergies, including the Secret Keeper herself, which is quite nice. So, having said that though, the secret deck is a bit RNG-ish. I've played with a very secret-heavy Mage deck to try it out. It's kind of tricky to play, only because you do rely then on what your opponent's going to do very heavily. But it can work. I've seen opponents quite flustered when they come across all these secrets and they don't know what they do. Nice bit of psychological warfare that you can play on your opponent. So that being said, one of the slightly more advanced deck builds that you might see is stuff that's focused around frost, a lot of freezing. So you can probably find a lot of Mage decks that contain things like the Ice Lance to freeze a character or deal the 4 damage, Frost Nova to immobilize enemies, Frost Bolt to do the same thing again and a bit of damage, Cone of Coal, also a big one, and where are you? Well, the Water Elemental is also useful for freezing, and the Blizzard. This is a Mage deck that includes basically all of the frost spells, and it's all about control, 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 holding your enemy back, picking off a minion here and there, but not necessarily clearing the board. Then, when he's committed with a lot of minions into the field, drop a Flame Strike, wipe them all out, and then you can start looking at using your spell damage minions, because by that time he's cleared a lot of his cards from his deck, and he's no longer in a position to really kill these off. And by that time, you're at a high enough mana, you should be sitting around 6 to 7 mana, and you can then, do your own, put your own minions out, and then deal some serious damage with Fireball, with your Pyroblast, and so on. Sorry. So, yeah, that's the power of the Mage deck. It's not as easy as some people think it is to handle, but there are some techniques you can use to just help build a good deck around the Mage. Alright, now let's take a look at the Druid deck. Now, the Druid deck is a slightly tricky one because if you're a new player, it might not be immediately apparent what the Druid deck's designed for. Now, if you're an experienced CCG player, it'll probably be very obvious very quickly for you. But if you're new to the genre of game, or to Hearthstone specifically, you might not be quite ooh, damn, eyes burning. You might not be quite as you might not get immediately what the Druid deck is designed for, and how the basic way of playing it. It's the design principle behind it. Let's put it that way. First, let's take a look at the hero ability for the Druid. Now, the Druid's hero ability is to give yourself 1 attack for a turn and 1 armor. Now, what this tells us really is that the Druid's hero ability is designed for helping to pick off small minions in the beginning of a game without taking too much damage. That's why there's the armor. So that's a pretty nice thing, to be able to just control the board a little bit in the beginning. It's not as nice as the Mage hero ability, in my opinion. The 1 armor only goes so far, because sometimes, with the Mage ability, you can pick off something that's been reduced to 1 health, but can do 10 damage. Your hero doesn't take that damage. The Druid deck really is designed for picking off small creatures in the beginning, which is why you only get the 1 armor and 1 damage. But if you then look at the actual cards in the Druid deck, you'll start seeing things like this Innovate. One of the first card in my deck here is this Innovate, to gain 2 mana crystals. You'll also find a card like Wild Growth to gain an empty mana crystal. You'll see cards like the Nourish to gain 2 mana crystals. So immediately you can see there's a lot of cards that help you build up your mana crystals nice and quickly, and temporarily in some cases. but why is that useful? So I've heard people mention that the Druid deck is very similar to the green deck in Magic. So if you played that, you might be familiar with what the Druid deck is then. The Druid deck is all about being able to get some nice, big, beefy minions out relatively early, and sometimes much earlier if you can get the card draw. If you think about it, if you on turn 2, for example, use the Wild Growth, that simply means that by turn 3 you can get a 4 mana cost card out. Pretty nice that. That also means that on turn 3, if you use an Innovate, you can now get a turn 6 card out because you gain 2 mana crystals. You have 4, you gain 2, you can put a 6 out. If you have the second one as well, it means you can get an 8 mana cost card out on turn 3. So that is pretty extreme and pretty nice. And that's really kind of what the Druid deck is about. It's about being able to get out big beefy minions nice and early, so and force your opponent to have to deal with these monstrous things that he just won't be able to by that stage of the game, and have abilities centered around helping support the nice big mana cost creatures that you've got. You can see, for example, there's stuff like Moonfire, which is just 1 damage, but great for picking off little minions that can start swarming you. Claw, for example, so that your hero can do more abilities. There is the... where is that one now? Bite. No, not Bite, where are you? The one they've nerfed, I think. Swipe. Swipe, for example, very, very nice card for to get some board clear. Pick a nice beefy minion to deal 4 damage to it, and then do 1 to all the others. So there are some cards as well to help you support your your big mana cost creatures. The other thing that you'll see is a lot of these types of cards, where it has a choose one to do one or the other thing. So it's got a lot of flexibility built into its the class's specific cards. And you can see even the legendary for the Druid deck is a choose option. So there's a lot of those options. Flexibility so that you can cast cards that give you options to match the situation you're in, and a lot of mana crystal effects that can help you get nice big beefy creatures out. So you can then get, for example, your Ironbark Protector out very, very early. Very, very useful. Yeah, so that is the basic of the Druid deck, and really the focus of the Druid deck then is to try and put a few really big minions into your deck, like this Ironbark Protector, and potentially, let's look at the 7 cost cards, things like the Core Hound, which I don't particularly like that, but it's a lot of damage early on. You can then look at getting, for example, you can look at getting your Gruul out. And the Gruul is quite useful because of that ability. So you get him out early enough, and the opponent just has no way to deal with this, except maybe a polymorph or something like that. And by the time your opponent has caught up to be able to, take over this, to deal with this, it's too late. He's already gotten to a 9/9 or a 10/10. Very, very useful. Let's see. Things like your War Golem, your Baron Geddon. Just look 1 mana cost down, and we can see this Canned Blood. So there's quite a few nice big cards you can use. Okay. So that is the basic idea of the Druid deck, the Mage deck, and the Hunter deck that we've looked at in this video. And so thanks, guys. If you have any questions or comments, maybe mention something that I haven't, feel free to pop those down below. I will read all my comments, don't worry. This is quite a new channel, so I don't get swamped quite yet. And if you want to be notified when the videos for the other classes are coming up, feel free to subscribe. There's a button up there somewhere. I don't know where they always move that damn thing. Feel free to hit that, and then, come back and watch the other videos. And that's it for now, guys. So thanks so much for joining me. Ciao.